Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is All New Secret Romance, issue number 43, dated June 1979. And again, like all these Charleston romances, or at least like most of them, they kind of follow the three-story format here. A little bit of social commentary in here. But otherwise, just sort of typical stories of love. Take a look at the cover. The characters on the cover are somewhat reminiscent of the couple in the first story. Although the female protagonist is drawn a bit older on the cover than she is on the interior story. It also looks like she's getting a little felt up here with this rather large cleavage. She is quite striking if this were a real woman. The cover kind of reminds me of a movie by Rock Hudson and Jane Wyman called All That Heaven Allows. And if you get a chance to see that movie, it's a really great movie. On the surface, it's a love story between a younger man and an older woman, but the subtext underneath it is about kind of social structures and social hierarchy and how those things are enforced and how people kind of navigate through them. So anyway, I'm going to go into the first story. And I don't think any of the ads were of note. No Time for Love. And our protagonists are Neil is the protagonist. He's the male protagonist. And Carol is the daughter. I forgot the young woman here. She's actually quite pretty. A little bit of kind of like early Kate Jackson. Lee. First name's Lee. So anyway, what's going on here is Lee is employed as a babysitter for Mr. Dennis, and that's Neil here. And he has a young toddler here. She looks about 2 years old. And Lee is the babysitter, but she's also doing more than just babysitting. She's more like the nanny, actually. Because it turns out that Neil is a single father. And basically what had happened is that his wife died during childbirth. And Lee figures that because of this incident, he has problems kind of wanting to connect with the daughter, Carol, who obviously had, no responsibility in what happened and will probably be haunted by it later on. But nevertheless, because of this, Dennis is not necessarily the best dad. He can be prodded into doing the right thing, but Lee has to push him into that direction. So anyway, Neil here, as I mentioned, he's a young executive, and he takes his work home with him, and he kind of like loses himself in his job. Or maybe he has really bad employers. Last year, there was a case of a bank executive for Bank of America, and basically Bank of America worked him to death. He was under 40 or just 40. He died of a massive heart attack, and it turned out for the last few months, Bank of America was literally working this guy 18 hours every day. And it just took a toll on him. And what was interesting, this guy was in the military. So the military couldn't do this to him, but corporate America did. So anyway, this is the path Neil's going right now. So anyway, Lee's a little bothered by this because the reason that Lee likes this job is that she's really become attached to Carol, I should say. And she's still prodding Neil to sort of, be more fatherly, be more loving to your own daughter here. She's upset, the daughter here, because she senses that the father is kind of treating her like an annoyance. However, as I had stated, Neil can be prodded into doing the right thing. So he does the right thing here, and he takes Carol to bed. We see Lee here. Again, she kind of has like maybe Marlo Thomas, Kate Jackson type look to her. Here, she's thinking that she really likes Carol. She loves Carol, and she knows that Carol loves her father. And she knows Neil obviously loves her, but at the same time, she has to break out this. Lee wants to figure out how to break this barrier that Neil has put up, a shell. So anyway, the two are talking about Carol, and Neil would actually Neil actually wants Lee to stay for a little while because Carol might wake up. She might need to take a piss or something. So he's this might be a pretext to keep her here longer because he wants to talk to her. He's really not a bad guy. He's just kind of like overworked. So the two are talking. Okay, maybe Neil is kind of a bad guy because he's saying, why are you bothering going to college? You're a young, beautiful girl. You're going to get married early, and you're not going to put that, that fangled college education, to use. And so I guess, so totally the whole women's lib thing passed him by because the idea of a woman being both having a career and a family is like totally alien to Neil here. And anyway, Lee is saying that she has no plans to get married immediately. She's going to hold that off for years and years. And she thought it out, which is good for her. She's doing what she sees is going to make her happy. So anyway, Neil kind of he gets a little personal with her, and he talks about his dead wife. And what had happened was that she had the same plans as Lee. Like she was going to hold off marriage and a family to focus on her career. But what had happened is that during their last semester in college, the two fell in love. And then she abandoned that plan to focus on her career and to, focus on having a family. And because of that, she was pregnant because of that. And then she died giving birth to Carol. So that's kind of what's going on. So he's sharing this with Lee. He's doing it much more economically than I did. Okay. So anyway, Neil's also bringing up the housekeeper. So to Neil's credit, he's not foisting this entire segregate mom thing on just, poor college student Lee. He also has the housekeeper who I suspect he expects her to be a little bit more than just the housekeeper. Kind of like how Alice was a little bit more than the housekeeper in the Brady Bunch. But apparently Lee doesn't like the housekeeper too much. Because the housekeeper has been whispering into Neil's ear that basically Lee is spoiling the child, that she's giving the child too much attention, and this might be bad for her. And Lee's fessing up and saying, listen, I love your daughter. I think she's wonderful. And if me showing affection, to your daughter, the affection you're not showing her, then yeah, I'm guilty of that. And she also knocks the housekeeper, saying that she's actually not particularly good at her job. And this is a thing kind of setting up the fact that in terms of the housekeeping duties, Lee has this down pat. She is built in. She loves kids. She's great with babysitting, and she can clean that apartment like no one's business, and she can cook and everything. Oh, and she can vacuum and change the beds. The cooking part comes later. So anyway, Lee is walking back to her car, and she's concerned about the time because it's almost 10 o'clock, and she doesn't want her dad to worry about her. Because once again, Lee is a good girl, and good girls do not let their dads down. But as she's heading toward the car, she's accosted by a mugger. This is kind of like the stereotypical quote mugger look that you would often see in 70s police shows. Really exaggerated, with the hat and the jacket here. So anyway, he's lunging forward toward Lee. And he's grabbing her purse. Lee is startled by this, but she wants this man to get away from her. He ends up knocking her to the ground, and he has possession of the purse. So fortunately, he was only after the money she had. However, in the next panel, the mugger is immediately belted with a left jab. And it turns out that it's actually Neil who is the man who delivered the punch. It turns out that Neil was watching Lee. And this is something that he regularly did. Obviously, he knows Lee has a car. She's going to park the car like right in front of the house. But nevertheless, every time that she leaves at night, he makes sure she gets into the car, which is not stalkerish. I don't consider that stalkerish. I consider that being a good person. The only thing that's not good here is this guy, this mugger. First they let him walk off, which I guess maybe Neil doesn't want to kind of wrestle with this guy. But nevertheless, the mugger is taking this in stride. He's taking his beating in stride, and he's not doing any crazy crackhead stuff. So, but they don't pay him no mind though. So apparently this was not a traumatizing event for them. So anyway, Neil is playing it off like he's just simply being a good employer, and he knows that Carol loves Lee as a babysitter, and but Lee knows that Neil means a little bit more, and then Lee comes a little closer, and then the two embrace in a kiss. So Lee kind of initiates the romantic, the physical part of the romantic experience, for lack of a better word. The gummies are kicking in. Okay, then it turns out Lee's went to sleep. She's dreaming. She's dreaming of the life that she could have with Neil. Neil's a decent guy, and he's a good-looking guy. Kind of has like a Robert Redford look to him. So it's understandable that she would feel this way about him. Okay, before I go back to the story, take a look at this one ad, and it's for Teen Beat's official star directory. And this is the time when you wanted to interact with your favorite star, you actually had to write them a letter. Obviously, in most cases, the stars never saw these letters, but nevertheless, many of the fan clubs would actually send something back to the fan, and to show their appreciation. I actually do remember a TV movie I watched as a kid, and it was about Elvis. And Elvis occasionally would write back to fans, or you'd write a little quick thing to them. The letters that kind of touched him. And I remember there was this one story. It happened in the 50s. It was a young autistic girl, and she had written to Elvis, and it kind of turned her life around, according to the caregiver. And this took place in the 50s, when they didn't even really know about this stuff. So anyway, you can write to Scott Baio, Andy. Oh, got some articles here. Andy Gibb steals Sean's girls. I remember Andy Gibb was involved with Victoria Principal. It felt like she was kind of using him, though. But how can he keep them? Okay, we get some free bonus stuff about Sean Cassidy and Parker Stevens. I think actually the Hardy Boys wasn't on air at this time. And you get other stars: Burt Reynolds, John Travolta, Sean Cassidy, Leif Garrett, who was big at this time, Barry Manilow, who was huge, Jaclyn Smith, Parker Stevens, the Bay City Rollers, Christy McNichol, and Richard Hatch. Yeah, they were all big at the time. So anyway, go back to the story. And it's the next day. Everything is seemingly normal. When Neil comes home, Lee and Carol are right there to greet him. Lee is expecting him to have his briefcase because, again, he's one of these executives who brings work home to him. But this time he didn't. He left it at the office, and he says, "Listen, no, life-work balance here. We're going to go out and have a nice meal." So Neil treated the two ladies here, I can say politely, to a nice restaurant. Lee's mentioning that the food's good, but a home cooked meal would be better. So again, Lee has all these household duty jobs down. So anyway, the two are at the table, and at this point, Lee just drops the question. He says, "Listen, do you want to get married?" And Lee is hesitant at first, believe it or not, from the way she feels. She wants to sort of take it a little slow. However, it doesn't take her long to decide yes. So again, Lee's a smart guy. Lee is a smart girl. She has a little bit on the ball here. And these two are going to make it. There's no reason why they wouldn't. Okay, the next story is World Without Love. And our protagonists are Miriam and Joe. Okay, and Joe's a cop. And we're going to see whether, ACAB applies or not. So we see Miriam here, beautifully drawn. Kind of, again, I always, she's my default brown hair girl, but Anne Archer. So she's kind of like an Anne Archer type. And you see that she's at this party. At the time, this is like high fashion. So we see the guy here, he has his earring, he has a soul patch, but he also has a polka dot ascot and a green safari jacket on with an earring. Again, he would be considered cool looking back then. And he's making a play for Miriam. He's making it clear that he wants something a little different than just a straightforward romance. So he's making it clear that he kind of wants to do the nasty. Miriam's not buying this. She's like, "Listen, I get these offers all the time. I'm not flattered by this crap. So I'm not interested." It turns out this is something that's been bothering Miriam for a while. The fact that she's someone who knew she was beautiful early on. And she knew that she could take that beauty and flip it into a career, which she has, because she's a highly paid fashion model here. But at the same time, because of how good looking she is, she felt that men viewed her more as a possession than as a person. So whenever she would encounter men, it would be in situations like this where the guy's making it clear that he views her as some type of conquest. And Miriam doesn't like that. She's talking about Mr. Safari Jacket here, saying, quote, "Gary's just another creep. The world is full of them. I used to think I was lucky to be the pretty..." Okay, I'll skip that part out.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So anyway, Miriam feels that kind of her beauty has been kind of also a curse. Being beautiful is, her cross to bear, so to speak. She dislikes, not only does she doesn't like kind of like the creepy guys hitting on her, she also doesn't apparently like guys who are into, let's say, alternative lifestyles here, because these two kind of look it. One of them kind of like this clean-cut blonde guy. He's saying, quote, after I read for Colin, he said he wanted someone with character. And his friend back here, who's wearing a tackier jacket, is saying, he prefers ugly actors, the fool. So yeah, and I love the expression on Miriam's face here. It is perfectly captures that look of boredom and contempt. So anyway, Miriam's tired of this because she's around people she views as phonies. So she decides to go home. And she sees a cop, and this is a cop that she's recognized before. She does seem to be she seems to be very interested in him, or at least at this moment she has interest in him. However, she actually views him as unattainable, because she figures that someone like him is probably already married. Then, as Miriam is walking down the block, she encounters two guys here who definitely don't look like they're up to any good here. And Miriam has mentioned that she has sort of encountered these creepy guys. They're always making comments toward her, and she doesn't feel at ease when they're around. However, because Joe is here, as basically, I guess her personal bodyguard. When you have beauty privilege, oh man, it opens up all types of doors. So anyway, Miriam is thankful that Joe is there and that George kind of kind of escorted her home because, because of him, she didn't have to listen to these guys. And Joe's kind of saying, you should be more careful, Mrs. Daniels. Little bit of chauvinism there, because she was being careful. It wasn't her fault, she ran into these two toads. So anyway, nevertheless, there's some banter going on. Apparently, Joe recognized Miriam from an ad that he had saw in a magazine that his sister has. So this gives Miriam kind of an opening to find out a little bit more about his marital status. He brought up, sister, hey, do you have a wife? And it turns out Joe's single. So Miriam, again, very well drawn, is kind of perking up here. Anyway, she thanks the officer for walking her home. Apparently, again, she's a well-paid individual, so she kind of lives in a building with a doorman. She asked the doorman, who's an older gentleman, about the officer, and turns out that the doorman is familiar with the officer. He's kind of like this Walter Cronkite-looking guy, so I guess this is sort of like the unofficial okay that this guy checks out, that Dad will like him. And again, this is very important to good girls. Dad has to like you. So anyway, it turns out a few weeks have passed, and Miriam hasn't seen Joe on duty. Neither of them were particularly aggressive. Obviously, most of Miriam's interest in Joe, she expressed with her thoughts, not necessarily with her actions. And she doesn't want to take a chance that Joe was just simply being kind of just very polite and not necessarily romantic. So anyway, Miriam's going to another one of her fancy parties. She's with this kind of Jimmy Olsen guy. I dare to say maybe Donald Trump in the mid-'70s. He kind of has that look, and he kind of acts the part because he's getting a little aggressive with Miriam here at the party. Um, and it turns out that Miriam does not like this. Again, she's a good girl. And then her date tells her, "Why don't you get lost, sweetie? There are other chicks here." So this is sort of the guy she was with. And Miriam leaves the party in her bell bottoms. But it's after 12. And she's worried that if she can't find a taxi, then she'll have to walk home. And apparently this is kind of a rough neighborhood, because there were those two kind of creepy guys earlier. And it turns out there's another individual here, male, who's following her. Again, this guy is up to no good. He literally kind of like the stereotypical migrant worker. So anyway, he's approaching Miriam. She's extremely frightened. She views this guy as, quote, "He looks like a monster." So yeah, so Miriam is quite frightened here. The creepy guy approaches, and the guy who looks creepy sounds creepy because he says, "And don't be scared, lady. I just want to ask you something." So it's weird. This is not someone who's actually saying, "Listen, I want your money and I'm just gonna leave." It's more like this guy was like seeking out some type of personal connection. And usually in situations like this, it's not good. And it wasn't good because the man actually does physically grab Miriam. Miriam is frightened, but she's yelling for help. It turns out that there was a patrol car in the area, and Joe was in the patrol car. Excuse me, again, the gummies. And then he does something to this guy. I don't know. He either gave him the nightstick or he gave him the taser. But whatever Joe did, or where he stuck it's effective because it only took one panel to incapacitate this guy. And Joe's partner, who kind of looks like Adolf Hitler here, he cuffs and takes the perpetrator into custody. Miriam and Joe are talking. Apparently Joe had seen Miriam from afar in the patrol car. And because of that, he wanted to kind of like, see that she's going to get home safe. So that's why Joe was in the area there. So anyway, now they have to do something with the perpetrator because around this time, women were very reluctant to file police complaints against SAers. And they did so because oftentimes it was actually the police establishment that would not treat these victims very well. So, but nevertheless, they want to encourage this behavior. So Miriam, she's at the police station. She's signing a formal complaint against the man. And Joe and Miriam are talking. Again, she is drawn so beautifully. I can't quite think of who she might be. If wow, maybe a little bit of. Can't think of it. She kind of has maybe a little bit of Linda Carter. Yeah, kind of maybe a brown-haired Linda Carter. No, I'll stick with Anne Archer. Yeah, she's beautifully drawn here, so she kind of looks like Anne Archer. The two are still talking. Turns out that Joe's schedule was changed, basically. So he had a later time when he was on patrol, and also he was in the patrol car. So it wasn't something like he was intentionally avoiding Miriam. It was just that his schedule had changed. So anyway, the two of them decided to meet when Joe was off duty. So this is not necessarily an official date. This is more like a getting to know you date. So anyway, Miriam is talking about the case. Joe's telling her that the perpetrator will be sent to a mental hospital instead of prison. So they kind of feel that that would be the best way to proceed. Yeah, some of these mental hospitals at the time were probably worse than prisons. But nevertheless, he's a guy who needed to be off the streets. So anyway, the two pivot to another conversation. It turns out that that Joe's nephew is having a party, and he's asking whether Miriam would be interested in going. So this is not one of those celebrity get-togethers. This is just the real people, the regular people that Miriam wanted to connect with. And of course, she agrees, and she says, "Listen, just pick me up at my apartment. You know where I live." Okay, so anyway, Joe and Miriam they're driving to the party, and it turns out Joe's nephew really likes Miriam, and what he does is that apparently Joe and the kid, they have kind of like a Saturday afternoon at the park thing. So this is sort of kind of like an irregular occurrence for the nephew. And he decides that he's going to invite Miriam to this, little get-together. Miriam recognizes that this kid doesn't really understand boundaries, but she's polite, and she says, "I'll try to be there, Billy." Joe's saying, "Listen, you don't have to listen to the kid. I'll kind of break it to him if you don't want to show up." But the thing is, Miriam actually does want to join them at the park, flying, his toy plane. And then Joe says, "Hey, we can do this more than just on Saturdays." And Miriam is and Joe's kind of strongly hinting that maybe marriage, could bloom here. And Miriam is definitely not throwing any water on the idea. She's being cautious. She's saying, "Listen, we still need to know each other. I need to know whether you're ACAB." And but Miriam's pretty confident that she has a good guy here. So anyway, yeah, I think these two are gonna make it. She had good motives, and she seems like a good person. So does Joe. So yeah, they're gonna make it. Okay, I'm gonna take a look at the last story. It's called Reckless, and our protagonists are Cleet and Anne. When I first read this story, I read Cleet as Cletus, and I could not understand why they would call a romantic lead Cletus. It was the second time I read this I realized that. So anyway, take a look at the splash page. Pretty good one. There's a shark in it. Charleston at this time loved drawing sharks. And we see a young woman here scuba diving in her bikini, and she sees this shark. She's quite frightened of it. It kind of looks like a tiger shark.
Tiger shark. A what?
However, there is someone in full scuba gear, and he's armed with a harpoon, and apparently this is taking place in the Caribbean. And the young woman here is a guest at a hotel, and one of the perks that the hotel offered is they'll take you out to do some scuba diving. And apparently the area that they normally take the tourists to has almost no shark activity. But in this case, a shark actually did show up. And obviously this is not the experience that the hotel wants for its clients. So it turns out the individual here who is with the harpoon, he's able to take on the shark, and he basically, it says he doesn't kill the shark, but nevertheless the shark left the area very agitated. So he was obviously successful in getting Anne out of the water here. So anyway, the captain of the boat, he kind of saw what was going on. above the water, and he's very thankful that Anne has made it back. She's very thankful that she made it back, and there's a couple other apparent passengers on this ship. The man in the scuba gear who saved Anne, this is Cletus. And Cletus is kind of saying that, listen, we're going to have to call off scuba diving today. The shark has kind of left the immediate area, but still might be hanging around. He's like really annoyed, and it might be best if, we did not make ourselves shark bait here. So anyway, he calls himself Cletus. Holy crap, he was Cletus. I think, the letterer made a mistake, and they called him Cletus. That's where I got it from. So anyway, he's Cletus here, the slack-jaw yokel. Maybe if he doesn't like Anne's vibe, he can just kind of play the goober act. But nevertheless, he seems to be connecting with Anne very well here. She's kind of that, Anne Archer type. And then the art's really nice. It's one of the in-house artists, Nicholas Aulesca. I wouldn't be able to pronounce it. I bet it's probably Portuguese. So anyway, Cletus, he goes and he does a little fishing himself when he's talking to Anne. So he's asking Anne, do you have a husband or a kind of a fiance or something like that? And Anne lets it be known that no, she does not have those things. So she's there kind of like as a single young lady. That's okay. So she's there as kind of a single young lady vacationing in the Caribbean. So anyway, it turns out that Cleet and Anne, they're having a conversation. And it turns out that Cleet was in the Air Force. Then he got a job as a pilot. But he didn't really find that work satisfying. This was when being an airline pilot. This is back when being an airline pilot. This was back when being an airline pilot was like a hugely prestigious thing. Then it turns out that Cletus, he also works as a stunt double, and he also drives cars. And he mentions that he actually has received some publicity for his race car driving. Anne likes Cletus or Cleet, but she doesn't really like the fact that this guy's taking a lot of risk. So she's already kind of seen that red flag early on with his risk taking. However, again, the two are kind of connecting here. So this is the third night that they've been together. So this is date number 3. It turns out Cleet is kind of letting Anne know a little bit more about him personally. Apparently that he was in the war. He was in some form of combat. This would probably be Vietnam. And apparently what had happened is that as the plane was coming down, it had hit some power lines. Well, they may not have been fighting. They could have been kind of like practice exercise. And it turns out that his best friend was killed in this plane accident. And this is why Anne believes that Cleet is taking way too many this is why Anne believes that Cleet is taking too many chances. That he's feeling some form of survivor guilt. And because of this, he maybe kind of has a bit of a death wish. Cleet is a bit defensive about this. He doesn't really like kind of Anne's amateur psychology evaluation, but nevertheless, it kind of sounds like Anne is onto something here. Anne is kind of really being very frank with Cleet here, saying that, listen, you have a lot going for you. And that so far you've been very lucky, but that luck might run out. And honestly, you're behaving recklessly with your life. And it turns out that Cleet doesn't want to hear this, so he walks off. And he feels like he's being preached to by Anne, even though she's honestly giving this guy good advice. So anyway, a little time has passed, and Anne starts to look to where Cletus went, or Cleet. Turns out that Cleet is gambling. So the hotel that she's staying at has a casino. I've been to casinos a few times. They are the saddest places. Everything here, like on TV, you see how it looks so lively and energetic. No, not in a real one. So anyway, it turns out that Cleet is doing well. Again, he's gambling, but he's gambling recklessly. But he's winning so far. And Anne kind of just asks Cleet to basically stop gambling. If you don't respect your life, at least respect your money. And Cleet says that he's going to stop. He's going to do so as kind of a favor for Anne. It's kind of a good thing, kind of not going to gamble his money away. Okay, before I go back to the story, take a look at this one ad. It's for Space 1999. These look like posters. Charleston was strange in that it was definitely the lower tier of the top comic book companies. But at the same time, they would also have some high prestigious licensing material. And Space 1999 was one of them. Okay, take a look at the poster. It's called Poster Riot. Let's see, Linda Ronstadt, who was quite the babe at that time. Fleetwood Mac, who's really great. I think actually one of their members is involved in a cult. And every time you buy one of their records, you're funding the cult. Then there's Kiss. They were big at the time. Boston, Bay City Rollers, they weren't so hot at the time. I think even back then we were like, they've seen better days. So anyway, we'll go back to our couple, Cleet and Anne. And Anne, of course, is very concerned about that money. And she points out, hey, don't you care about losing that money? And Cleet says that he comes from money, that his parents are very wealthy and very well off. So anything that he would lose there might seem like the kid's college fund to one person, but to him it's kind of just pocket change. And that's part of the reason why he's a little reckless with this money. And then it turns out the two had some fun. Once Anne got Cleet away from the gambling tables, they went dancing and they were enjoying themselves. And again, the two are romantically embracing here. Kind of thinking maybe Cleet looks kind of like Pierce Brosnan. Yeah, he looks like Pierce Brosnan here during the Remington Steele years. I'm sorry, the gummies are really kicking in. So okay, the two are embracing. Cleet's he looks into Anne's eyes and he says, "I see a future with you," and she feels the same way. Anne believes she's falling in love. The evidence suggests that. So anyway, they make plans for a date tomorrow to see each other. And Cleet comes up with a plan on what they could do. And of course, at this time, separate beds, separate rooms on different floors. And Anne is dreaming about Cleet and the romantic life that she can have with him. But she also recognizes that there's an aspect of danger because he might not change his reckless ways. So again, Anne's being a little smart here because she realizes she has to know who she's marrying. Of course, she doesn't want him to take these risks. However, the decision was taken out of Anne's hands because when she goes down to the hotel lobby in the morning, it turns out that Cleet has left the island. Now, she's clearly startled by this, and she's bothered by this. But at the same time, she didn't really develop that deep a connection with him. So again, Anne's being very smart. She's being very cautious. She didn't just, threw herself into love. She was still like, listen, I still need to know who this guy is. And because of this, Anne is not devastated by this. Obviously, she feels let down, but she prepared herself that, hey, this guy might be playing me. So again, Anne's very cautious, and she just at this point kind of writes Cleet off because she doesn't know where he really went. He just says he went to Miami. So then 3 weeks have passed, and she's still thinking about Cleet. So she hasn't been going out with anyone. Looks like she still lives at home. We see Daddy here, and Daddy is watching the Wide World of Sports. This is the Southern 500. So Dad is into car racing. Again, this is a good sign because, hey, it turns out that Cleet is a race car driver. And during the telecast, the color commentary guy, he mentions Cleet's name. And because of this and because of the history, Anne immediately recognizes this is her Cleet. This is her Cletus. And she's excited to see him on the TV. Turns out he's driving race stock cars. And they could go up to 200 miles an hour. I guess that's correct. I don't really know. I never found race car driving interesting at all. And but it turns out this is an exciting race. And Anne is riveted. Oh, she's so beautifully drawn here. And it turns out that that Cleet is actually second. And he's heading on the leader. But the thing is that as this is going on, the guy who is in the lead, he smashes into the wall. And his car is overturned, and his car is on fire. And it looks really bad for this particular driver. But it turns out that Cleet is a good guy. He's a good guy. He's like, this race isn't that important. I need to help that driver who happens to be a friend of mine. So not only is this like a fellow colleague, this is a guy who he considers a personal friend. So Cleet jumps out of the car. He heads for the incapacitated driver. Now, it turns out the driver has been knocked unconscious, but he may otherwise be fine. Now, it turns out the two of them are both going to the hospital. Doesn't look like Cleet sustained any injuries. But nevertheless, the two are heading to the hospital. Anne is completely beside herself. She goes to Daddy, of course, as a good girl does. And she wants to actually, call the hospital and see what's going on. The father advises Anne to at least give them an hour, because at this point they're going to be examined by the doctors, and they shouldn't be interrupted. And always, Daddy gives good advice. So then, turns out they contacted the hospital. They got the information they needed. Anne is booking a flight to Atlanta. And by noon tomorrow, Anne is actually in Richard's hospital room. So she got there pretty quick. And Cleet seems sort of like a changed man here. Because it turns out that he was thinking about Anne a lot, and he realizes how foolish he was with all his risk-taking. And that last incident was enough to kind of jar him out of, needlessly or kind of thrill-seeking, these very dangerous situations. So then it turns out that he's gonna put the daredevil stuff behind him, and he asks whether Anne would be interested in marrying him. And she lays on a big wet kiss to say yes. These two are gonna make it. They're gonna make it. The communication was good between the two of them, and Anne is a good girl. So anyway, take another poster ad. Some of these names I actually never heard of. I can rattle the ones that I have. John Travolta, Robbie Benson, who's kind of big. He kind of has this hair helmet on. Barry Manilow, Scott Baio, but Scott Baio as Chachi. Debbie Boone, Debbie Boone was a one-hit wonder. She had this like love song to God that was like the number one song for like 3 months. Erica Estrada, who was big on chips at the time. Leif Garrett, who was big at the time. He had 2 different types of posters. Sean Cassidy, Parker Stevens, Gene Simmons of KISS, Paul Stanley of KISS, Ace Frehley of KISS, Peter Criss of KISS, the Bay City Rollers, Leslie McGowan, I'd never heard of her. Stuart Woody Wood, never heard of him. Eric Faulkner, never heard of him. Derek Longmore, never heard of him. Heard of Cheryl Ladd, Fleetwood Mac, Boston, Andy Gibb, $6 Million Man. Farrah Fawcett as Holly in Logan's Run. Logan's Run is a good film. But the thing is, at this time, Farrah Fawcett had a very famous poster of her in a red swimsuit. And they had to distinguish that you're not going to get that one. You're going to get the one where she's Logan's Run, where she looked really beautiful in. Bionic Woman. Lindsay Wagner was actually considered for Logan's Run. Starsky and Hutch, the Bee Gees, Peter Frampton, who had that one big year, Chrissy McNichol. Honestly, I know there was much ado about her. I think that was more media driven. I never really had strong feelings toward her. Cheryl Tiegs, like She Cares, and Eight Is Enough. Those are the posters you can get. So now we're going to look at Buck's Bag and see some of the problems that the kids were having back then. First letter is from Halfway Unhooked. It's a 14-year-old girl, and she likes a 14-year-old boy. The thing is that the boy has been telling his friends that he likes her. But when she confronts him directly, he denies it. And she also says that he seems to care more about his Superman comics than he does about her. But nevertheless, she's still kind of pursuing him. They live in the same apartment building, and he lives on the floor above. So what he does is that she will play music that she knows that he likes loudly as kind of a way of sending a signal that, that she is smitten with him. However, he's been kind of ignoring her. And she's saying that during this time, there are other boys who are asking her out. So she's kind of putting her romantic life on hold for this individual. And she's kind of confused because she doesn't want to lose out on these opportunities, but at the same time, she really cares for this kid. She doesn't know what to do. Halfway unhooked. And Buck says you should just fully unhook yourself. He says right now he doesn't seem particularly interested in girls. He wants to focus on, the ongoings of Superman. And then you're better off simply playing the field. And he's saying that you wouldn't have a good experience with this kid anyway if he cares more about his comic books than you. So I kind of agree with him. So Buck's saying, listen, have fun, go out with those other boys. The ones who are interested in you. Second letter is also from a 14-year-old girl. She is upset. And honestly, she is incredibly confused. She's a 14-year-old girl, and she likes a boy who's 13 years old. She says that the boy is aware that she likes him, but she says she isn't sure whether he likes her. And she says that some of the things that were going on with them were that whenever she would visit his house, he would ask his younger brother to stay in the room with her rather than being alone. That alone is a huge red flag there. He's kind of using his younger brother this way as a human shield to avoid like any type of interactions with her. And also, he's been telling kids at school that he hates her. And whenever she calls him to see whether, he likes her, he'll say, "Oh, I like this other girl instead." And she's asking Buck, quote, "Do you think he likes me? What should I do? Sometimes I write him love notes and he reads them. Do you think he'll ever face me? He acts as though he likes one of my girlfriends. I like him though. And I don't want to like anyone else. Please, can you help me?" This girl desperately needs a clue. Buck says, basically, yeah, you need a clue. That you're putting too much pressure on this guy, and he's just going to remember you as a pest if you keep this up. And that honestly, get the hint. He does not like you. Okay, and the last letter is from Troubled. It's another girl. Doesn't state her age, though. There's a boy in school she likes, and he's really good looking. And he actually went out with her about 2 or 3 times. But the thing is that all the other girls in school think he's good looking too. And he's kind of dating around. And apparently all this female attention is kind of gotten to his head a little. And that, he's acting like he's an Adonis. In fact, she even says, quote, "He seems to think he's a god. He likes me one minute and tells me to get lost the next. What should I do?" This is Troubled. Buck says that, forget this guy. Just walk away. This guy, he has more options than anyone else in school, which means that, he's going to be looking around. He's not going to be tethered to one individual. And that this guy right now is having an inflated ego. So, just walk away. And, those are the goings-on with some of the kids in 1979. Okay, so I think that's it. And that is my walkthrough of Secret Romance, issue number 43. And I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.